So tell me a little bit about your company. Are you implementing beyond budgeting principles in Davista?
Yes, I would say that we are. We've actually already gotten rid of the traditional budget. I'm relatively new in Davista, so I started there a year ago. Before that, I have a long experience. I got rid of the budget in my previous company where I was for 13 years. It was an energy company, so very capital intensive, long-term business. And I got introduced to Beyond Budgeting. I met Bjarte Buksnes in 2013. At that time, I was doing an executive master's study at a university in Norway. And I met Bjarte, and he was preaching about he was doing a presentation about Beyond Budgeting, and I got really interested and talked to him afterwards. And then I ended up deciding to write a master's thesis on that previous company and attempting to get rid of the budget in that company. And then I started a new job last year where they had a budget when I came in. And I think because of a little bit chance and circumstance, but because of the market situation, the market really went down. They found out as well that, okay, this budgeting is not working, we have to do something else. So now they're also working in this direction of Beyond Budgeting.
Wow. Forgive me for taking you backwards, but I am sort of fascinated to talk to anybody who's implemented Beyond Budgeting or taken the budget out of their company. How hard was that?
It was actually surprisingly easy in a sense.
Okay.
I think I'm one of few that says that.
Right.
I guess it's probably oversimplified to say that it was easy, but at the time we had a CEO that wasn't really that interested in budgeting, and as long as we could show him what we would do instead, I think he was willing to try.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said to him, at the end of the day, what's the worst thing that can happen? We're not going to go bankrupt in a matter of a year, so let us try something different without a budget and see how it works. And if we don't succeed, then we can just go back to budgeting last year.
Right.
Nobody forgets how to budget.
No, true. And who was the hardest to persuade?
I think maybe at the time the CFO.
Right.
Because he had an accountant background and was very detailed focused, liked the whole budget process in the fall, using months with all of these rounds of, gaming and negotiating and going back and forth. So I think maybe him with his background that he was a little bit skeptical, but when I think we got the CEO and the other stakeholders on board, the rest of the leadership team, trying to explain it to employees, trying to involve HR as much as we could, I think actually it was relatively easy. There was one, actually, now I just remembered, there was one board member at the time. He really loved his budget as well. So he was probably the most difficult one to convince. But then it was just the argument to get the CEO on board to really fight for this. And then it was the argument, listen, let us try for a year. Yeah. What's the worst that can happen?
Great. And so you did it, you got it through, you persuaded everybody that we need to give this a go. Yeah. So what impact did you see? What benefits did you see of getting rid of this thing called the budget? I
think the biggest thing, this is the strangest thing, this is the previous business, the previous company that I was in, it's capital intensive. You're building hydropower plants, you're building bioenergy plants, you're building the grid for the entire area. So I think what was strange when I came in was that you had this really long-term business and with a really short-term perspective. So a lot of the people working there, especially finance people, were using 80% of their time looking backwards, and maybe at best 20% of their time looking forwards. And in such a company, when you're going to invest in something that's going to, a hydropower plant is going to be there for 100 years, it's really key that you have the right people and your decision makers and finance people looking forward. Yeah. So when I came in and I was, we were making, the only thing we were basically doing was making a budget for the next year, both on the P&L level, but also an investment budget. So which power plants or which investments were we going to do for the next year? And that's really strange when you have such a long-term business if you're just looking at, 9 to 12 months ahead of time. So I think, and we were very clear about that when we were fighting to get rid of the budget. We're not doing this to cut resources, to get rid of finance people. We're doing this to get people to do the right things, to get people to lift their head and look forward. Because what has been has been. There's not really anything we can. Of course, we can learn from that, but in order to make the right decisions, we have to have more forward-looking analysis.
So that clearly worked. You like that, and now you're with DeVista.
Yeah.
So are you doing the same again?
I'm doing the same again to a certain degree. Of course, at the same time, I said earlier, it's a company that produces windows and doors throughout all of Europe. So I'm located in a factory in Norway. So we're busy. I've been mostly busy with, unfortunately, closing down factories because of the market, and then consolidating production and investing in the factories that we have. But I had some luck when I came in, because I started preaching about these things as soon as I came in about beyond budgeting. I was also clear about that in the interview process, that this is something I'm passionate about. And when I came in at a time where the market just really went down, and we were struggling with volumes. So I think that alone got a lot of people in the company to see it. Yeah, but we just spent all this time on making a detailed budget, and then in a matter of a month or two, it's completely irrelevant. And we're sitting all year commenting on the same things of why we're not reaching budget numbers.
Right.
So they of course saw it themselves, but I'm also pushing from my side to change the mindset, and we've actually already gotten rid of the budget in DeVista.
Right.
In a sense, there's still work to be done. We still call it an anchor estimate.
Okay.
I'm finished with the anchor estimate because that was last fall. So now I'm looking forward, but. Of course, when the budget is a 100-year-old tool.
Sure.
So when you're used to working at that, you can't change that
you've got to
mindset
evolve
overnight.
it.
So it has to be worked with over time.
Yeah.
That there are other ways of doing things, other tools you can use.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you're clearly a sort of passionate believer in this. It comes through in the way you speak about your experiences. So you're now a Beyond Budgeting ambassador. Well, in the first place, what motivated you to become a Beyond Budgeting ambassador?
Yeah. Well, when I was deciding last year to make the change, I wanted to make a change in my career and go from, I had been a long time in the energy business and I wanted to do something else. And I wasn't really sure what that path was going forward, so I actually toyed with the idea of maybe going back to consultancy and working within, Beyond Budgeting, jumping from company to company and helping them make the transition. I decided not to do that. I decided to actually continue now in a new company. But at the same time, I got asked then by the Beyond Budgeting core team if I would like to be an ambassador and be more involved. And I think the major role of the ambassadors is to kind of like, feel how it is in the real world on your body. And, because it's one thing to talk about these things in theory and on an intellectual level, but then in every day you're thrown into the situation that you're thrown into, and sometimes you have to make compromises and say, okay, this is probably not technically 100% correct in a Beyond Budgeting world, but it's taking that practical experience that you have from the workplace and trying to merge the worlds of theory and practice.
Absolutely. So in the role of the ambassador, if you were a consultant almost into Beyond Budgeting itself, I think you mentioned earlier that you first heard about Beyond Budgeting in 2010. Yeah. I wonder if you know how you heard about it, but how do you think Beyond Budgeting needs to work to get this message out, more broadly?
Yeah. That's a very difficult question. I think, because this is a group of people that we don't do this because we want to earn, we don't want to get rich on it. So, that's a problem in itself, trying to get the dedicated resources. We're a group of people that talk about these things because we're really passionate about it. And, I ask my colleagues all the time, do you think I'm strange because I find work super fun? Work, I look at work as one of my hobbies. Yeah,
that's the best way to make a living.
Yeah. So I guess I could feel lucky in a sense, but, so we're not a group of people. We do this because we're passionate about it. We want to take the learnings that we have. We want to learn from other people. And we want to make changes in companies. And I really believe that people that, going from a traditional management model to a beyond budgeting management model, it's not just fun, but it's also profitable. And I'm convinced that the companies that make the transition will be more profitable in the long run.
So with all the experience that you've had of implementing beyond budgeting, at various stages in your career, what advice would you have for organisations that are considering beyond budgeting? We've got an audience of explorers, potentially with us today. What would you be saying to them?
I think I've met a lot of companies up through the years, and I think maybe sometimes I could have offended some of them along the way. Because one of my key points of advice would be, you can only design to a certain degree. At some point you have to jump and try. So I've met some companies that have designed and designed and designed and designed, and they never ever really got started and actually doing anything. So you can only plan so much, and at some point you have to take a risk and just say, okay, now we're going to try something new. And again, I'm back to what's the worst that can happen. I mean, you won't go bankrupt just because you don't have a budget for a year. And if you see that costs rise, I don't think they will, but if they do, then you can just start budgeting again the year after.
I wonder if there is something in the reassurance point there, because you say what's the worst that can happen, we're not going to go bankrupt within a year, but I bet there's a number of CEOs out there going, I'll tell you what the worst that could happen is.
He can lose his job. He or she can lose their job. But imagine that little downside and imagine the upside if you can stand there for your board and say, look what I've done, I've changed this company. So for me, the upside is so much more lucrative and interesting and exciting than the potential little downside.
Robin, you've been brilliant. So thanks so much for spending some time with me, and thanks on behalf of Beyond Budgeting for all you're doing as an ambassador.
Thank you as well.